Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, DZX Tricks. Thanks for the suggestion, DZX Tricks. You asked, how does inside-out tracking work in VR? If you've ever put on a VR headset and wondered, how does this thing know where I am? Or, more importantly, why does it keep making me punch my furniture? You're not alone. Inside-out tracking is the tech that makes VR work without external sensors, and it's both amazing and a little bit mysterious. So, if you've ever wanted to know how your headset knows what's up, literally, stick around as we dive into the magic of inside-out tracking, right here on Explaining Everything. Inside-out tracking is how VR headsets track your movement without the need for external cameras or base stations. Older VR setups, like the first HTC Vive, needed external sensors placed around your room. Basically, your walls had to become part of the VR experience. Inside-out tracking flips the script. Instead of relying on external sensors to track the headset itself does all the tracking. How? With tiny cameras and sensors built right into the device. Think of it as turning your VR headset into a tiny, hyper-intelligent security camera. But instead of watching for burglars, it's watching you flail around your living room. Your VR headset has several cameras, usually positioned on the front and sides. These aren't like regular cameras that take selfies. Instead, they look for edges, shapes, and patterns in your environment to understand where you are in space. This process is called simultaneous localization and mapping, SLAM, which is a fancy way of saying, I'm figuring out where I am while also building a map of the world around me. It's kind of like how bats use echolocation, except instead of making terrifying screeches, your headset is silently analyzing the room, identifying objects, and constantly recalculating its position. So when you move forward, backward, or spin in circles like a confused Roomba, the headset updates your position in real time, based on those reference points. Now, here's where things get really clever. Your VR controllers have tiny LEDs or infrared markers on them that the headset's cameras can detect. As you move your hands, the cameras track these lights and update their position hundreds of times per second. But there's a catch. If your controllers move out of sight of the headset's cameras, things start to get wonky. Ever noticed how your controllers freak out if they're too close to your face? That's because the headset can't see them. The cameras need a clear line of sight, so if you block the controllers with your own hands, or if you decide to scratch your nose mid-game, your virtual hands might just disappear. Some newer headsets, like the MetaQuest, are even ditching controllers entirely in favor of hand tracking. Instead of using handheld devices, the cameras track your actual fingers. The upside? No more losing controllers. The downside? Your hands in VR feel like they belong to a ghost. Inside-out tracking is impressive, but it's not perfect. Here's why it might occasionally betray you at the worst possible moment. First, low light equals bad tracking. If your room is too dark, your headset's cameras struggle to see objects. No objects equals no tracking. It's like trying to drive at night without headlights. Second, too much light also means bad tracking. Sunlight can interfere with the cameras, sometimes making your controllers float off into another dimension. Third, fast movements can confuse it. If you're swinging your arms wildly, looking at you, Beat Saber players, your controllers might temporarily lose tracking. Your VR headset tries its best, but it wasn't built to handle your karate master energy. Fourth, tracking blind spots. If you move your controllers too far behind your head, congratulations, you've just entered VR's Bermuda Triangle. The headset can't see them, so they disappear. This is why bow and arrow games sometimes feel like an accidental comedy sketch. Even with these issues, inside-out tracking is way more convenient than the alternative. No external cameras, no base stations, and no drilling weird boxes into your walls just to play Half-Life, Alyx. It's also cheaper. Companies don't have to include extra sensors, which means VR headsets are more affordable. And let's be honest, if a piece of tech can be both cheaper and easier, it's a win. VR tracking is getting smarter all the time. Some companies are working on predictive tracking, where the system guesses your next movement before you even do it. That sounds cool, until your headset knows your reflexes better than you do. Another big leap: full-bodied tracking without external sensors. Right now, if you want to track your legs in VR, you need extra trackers, or you just accept that you're a floating torso. But in the future, AI and camera-based tracking could figure out where your legs should be. Finally, VR dance battles will look less like a haunted puppet show. So, to sum it up, inside-out tracking uses cameras on your headset to map your environment and track movement. It's not perfect, but it's a massive step forward in making VR more accessible and less of a cable management nightmare. And as for you, DZX tricks, if your furniture keeps getting in the way, maybe invest in some padded walls. Your coffee table has suffered enough. If you enjoyed this and learned the inner workings of those VR headsets, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.